Well, now much has been said and will be said about the passing of Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. Billboards right across the UK, including at London's Piccadilly Circus, dropped their advertisements and beamed out images of Prince Philip. Many around the world developed an understanding of Prince Philip through the Netflix series The Crown. But that series only dwelt on the fact that Philip was the oldest ever male in the royal family, married to the longest reigning British monarch in history. In the weeks following his marriage to the Queen, Prince Philip wrote to his mother-in-law, declaring his hopes for the relationship, and he, quote, "My ambition is to weld the two of us into a new combined existence that will not only be able to withstand the shocks directed at us, but also have a positive existence for the good." What is not commonly known is that Philip was born on the kitchen table of the family villa in Corfu, the fifth child and only son of Prince Andrew of Greece. In 1922, just after Philip was born, his uncle, the King of Greece, was forced to abdicate after the debacle of the Greco-Turkish War from 1919 to 1922. Prince Philip's father, Prince Andrew, was working in the army and was accused of treason and exiled. The family fled to Paris, where they'd be based for the next decade. Prince Philip was 18 months old. In Paris, the mother, who was cognitively deaf but could speak clearly, was diagnosed as schizophrenic. When Philip was 9, his mother was admitted to a Swiss sanatorium, that's an asylum, where she was held against her will for over 2 years. Philip's mother, Alice, Princess of Greece, was a great-granddaughter of Queen Victoria. So in a sense, Prince Philip and the Queen were distantly related. Prince Philip was sent away to school in England to stay with his grandmother, Victoria Mountbatten, at Kensington Palace. He didn't see his mother until the funeral of his sister Cecily, who died in a plane crash at the age of 26 in 1937 with her husband, 2 sons and mother-in-law on a plane travelling to London to attend the wedding of her husband's brother. Philip was 16. But prior to their deaths, Cecily and her husband had become members of the Nazi Party. In fact, Philip's youngest sister, Sophie, actually named her son Karl Adolf after the German dictator. It was because of the sisters' close involvement with Nazi Germany that they were not invited to Prince Philip's wedding. Philip's mother was honoured for saving Jews during the Holocaust, and he stayed close to his mother, who lived in Buckingham Palace in her final years. While the mother had been committed to an asylum, Philip's father took up residence in Monte Carlo with his mistress, and his sisters married German aristocrats and moved to Germany with them. Prince Philip was stateless and homeless, taken in by Lord Mountbatten, the man who would have a profound effect on his future and steer him into the Royal Navy in 1939. Prince Philip first sighted the young Princess Elizabeth when her parents, King George VI, visited the Royal Navy College at Dartmouth in 1939. She was 13. He was subsequently invited to Buckingham Palace as the young war hero. Princess Elizabeth decided he was the one. Her parents were less enthusiastic, considering her too young, and the courtiers thought Philip a bit rough and unpolished. But he renounced his right of succession to the Greek throne and took up the name Mountbatten. He had been born Philippos, Schleswig, Holstein, Sonderburg, Glucksburg. But happily, he settled for Mountbatten. But he was none too happy when Prime Minister Churchill insisted the royal family take the name Windsor, not Mountbatten, to which Philip replied, "I'm the only man in the country not allowed to give his name to his children." Philip got half his way when his descendants go by the name Mountbatten Windsor. He retired at the age of 96, bowing out of royal duties. Prince Philip spent his time at Sandringham up Norfolk Way, reading voraciously, and then moved to Windsor Castle, where he died last Friday. I appreciated the comments of the former New South Wales Premier Bob Carr, who said he liked Prince Philip's humour and his, quote, ability to offend people. Said Bob Carr, every time somebody was reporting on his faux pas, I thought, go for it. Well, Prince Philip needed little encouragement. He once said, "It's my invariable custom to say something flattering to begin with, so I will be excused if I put my foot in it later." On meeting the President of Nigeria, dressed in traditional robes, the Duke said in 2003, "You look like you're ready for bed." In the light of such a distinguished career of service, How does one evaluate the abrupt response, 6 hours after his death, I might add, by Meghan Markle and Prince Harry? Quote, "Thank you for your services. You'll be greatly missed." It does prompt the thought about the two, Harry and Meghan, who've kept their titles to maintain the trappings of royalty, preferring service to self over service to others, preferring commercial deals over charity, preferring royalties over the royal family. Prince Philip in his career performed 22,991 solo engagements. He undertook 637 overseas visits. He made 5,493 speeches and wrote 14 books. Perhaps the passing of Prince Philip might encourage these two to understand the meaning of service and sacrifice from their multi-million-dollar home in California. Prince Philip's a man who 73 years ago abandoned self for service and embraced the royal family of another country. What must he have thought of a grandson who abandoned his family for self-interest? In death, Prince Philip grows in stature. In life, Prince Harry, unfortunately, struggles to find some. The former Prime Minister Tony Abbott captured the perfect tone when he wrote at the weekend, "Death is inevitable, but a good life is not. Part of the human stain is our tendency to look for the minor flaws in people rather than trying to discern their fundamental strengths. Those of us," he wrote, "who scoffed at his humour or scorned the crown he served have to face the awkward reality that he was almost a better man than any of us." Well, David Flint is the Emeritus Professor of Law at UTS, but he's also the National Convener of the Australians for Constitutional Monarchy. He has written powerfully and movingly about Prince Philip and his wife for Spectator Australia, opening by arguing that we owe the Queen and the late Prince Philip, quote, "a debt greater than they would ever claim or we shall ever know." Professor Flint joins us. David Flint, thank you for your time. It's extraordinary, isn't it, in the light of what we've seen with Meghan Markle, that the Queen at 21 dedicated herself to a lifetime of service. You've called it leadership beyond politics. How else do you see it?
It's extraordinary, isn't it, that we are so fortunate to have an institution, a constitutional institution, which does provide leadership beyond politics. And so many Americans I know are so envious. They so regret that in the American system there's no similar body. The president, who always comes from one party, is always political. But in our system, we do have this extraordinary leadership beyond politics, which the prince so courageously carried out all of his life.
Yeah, and in 15 other realms, as you say, across the world as well, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. I thought you made an outstanding point when you said the Crown is now constitutionally important, not for the power it wields, but for the power it denies others. Professor Flint, just amplify that very important point.
Well, until just after the War of Independence, the American War of Independence, the system in Britain was, as it was suggested, a disguised republic, because the king was the executive. The prime minister, the ministers had to have his confidence, and the king played, if he wished, a significant role in the administration of the country, a political role. And so he did in relation to the War of Independence, an unfortunate role. But after that came our Westminster system, where the government of the day is formed with the confidence of the lower house, the House of Commons, the House of Representatives. And this has lifted the monarchy. It has allowed the monarchy to evolve to a new and wonderful stage where there are some powers there which can only be exercised by the King, by the Queen, by the Governor-General, but they have to be exercised according to convention, and it requires the elected leaders of the government to actually go and ask, so that the Governor-General, the Queen, is satisfied that what she is advised to do is within her powers, and that there are no conditions on the exercise of that power which haven't been fulfilled. So we have a wonderful system which allows us to have this institution which did what the Queen has done all of her life, and she's done that with the support of her consort,
Yes.
of Philip, and they've been able to do wonderful things, non-political things, like the
Quite.
Duke of Edinburgh award scheme.
Quite. I mean, would Prince Philip ever have imagined the outpouring of grief at his death? This is the man, I said, who gave up his own royal family to be part of the Windsors. But you and I know that in the death, of course, we should always remember that there are people watching us tonight who are grieving for loved ones and families who remain unknown. But at the same time, it's quite extraordinary, isn't it, that suddenly he has, as I said, a stature in death which he may never have imagined he enjoyed in life.
That is so true, and you only need to go back to the time of the award of the knighthood by Tony Abbott to see how that was used. They made up stories which were completely untrue, and they used that as a stepping stone to seize the prime ministership from Tony Abbott and to hand it to Malcolm Turnbull. But one of the most outrageous things they suggested was he had nothing to do with Australia. And he had everything to do with Australia.
Well, now, can I interrupt you there?
In our defence.
Can I interrupt you there, because I want to quote exactly what Professor Flint has written about that. When you wrote in The Spectator, the most hurtful, indeed grossly insulting lie was that Prince Philip had little connection with Australia. In fact, he risked his life for us, and that for several years, as a young Greek prince, immediately on topping his class at the Royal Naval College, Dartmouth. He volunteered for the Royal Navy, protecting our convoys, mentioned in dispatches, serving with Aussies in battles, and later protecting our shores while attached to the Sydney and Manus-based British Pacific Fleet. After his naval career, you wrote, was cut short, he did our bidding regularly over almost 7 decades, visiting us well over 30 times and constantly drawing favourable international media attention to us. Now, Professor Flint, Tony Abbott knew all of that. He decided to honour him, as other countries had honoured him, with a knighthood. And as you said, this was used as an agenda to get rid of Abbott and put Turnbull in the prime ministership.
And the plotters they weren't at all backward in deciding to make about 10 lies, 10 untruths, to justify damning the knighthood as though it were something outrageous, as though it were a scandal never before done. Yep. There were about 70 countries in the world which had awarded the Duke their highest order. Some republics gave him a knighthood, for example, and all of these countries gave that. Nobody in any other country raised an eyebrow except to give approval.
Absolutely. What about his humour, though?
Most of them.
Sorry. I was going to ask you about his humour. You could go on for all night about his humour. He once said, when a man opens a car door for his wife, it's either a new car or a new wife. and a journalist, they were at a banquet at the Élysée Palace in the French president's palace in 2006, and the journalist asked Queen Elizabeth if she was enjoying her stay in Paris, to which the Duke interjected and said, a damn fool question. So, I mean, all of this, I mean, you mentioned the Duke of Edinburgh award scheme to help young people, 14 to 24-year-olds. I mean, on the 60th anniversary in 2016, about 8 million youths from 130 nations, 800,000 young Australians.
Yes, and some of them will say, we'd be in jail but for this award,
yes,
but for what was taught to us, the resilience, the way we could reach our own level, we could achieve things. We learned all these things from this award, the sort of things which we should be learning in school, and the sort of things that were taught to the Prince at Gordonstown, which he loved. Yes. He relished that very hard life where he could realise all of the sorts of ambitions that he wanted to, not only intellectual, but also physical and sporting and the very sense of service.
Just before you go,
which dominated his life.
Prince Harry's now arrived. He's apparently going to go to the funeral. Will royalties continue to be more important to him and Meghan Markle and the royal family?
I hope not. He has a wonderful record. What he did, for example, in relation to the Invictus Games, was a wonderful proposal. It was the sort of thing which his grandfather did in relation to the Duke of Edinburgh award scheme. He was going on a very good track, and I do hope that he and his wife will realise that he should return to that sense of service and get away from being a celebrity in Los Angeles, and don't ever do what he did with that ridiculous interview, washing your dirty linen in public, making allegations in public which should never be made. That was completely unacceptable.
Absolutely.
I hope he learns while he's there that this was the wrong thing to do, and he should return.
73 years of devotion to his wife, while she gave that devotion to the public, an enormous life. Perhaps one of the reasons his death, David Flint, has provoked such generous outpourings of sentiment is that they most probably don't make them, like the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip again. Douglas Murray wrote today, is it better to have the attitudes of the Duke of Edinburgh with his uncomplaining, keep buggering on attitude towards life, or is it better to have the emotional resilience of certain other people who have married into the royal family of late? He says, because according to that particular branch of the royal family, the point of life is to move to California, cash in your connections, make podcasts and do voiceovers for Netflix series. The Duchess of Sussex was 38 years old, says Douglas Murray, when she expounded that world view, an age by which Prince Philip had survived the revolutions of his childhood, the battles of World War II and years of public service. It's lovely stuff. Extraordinary human being. There'll be plenty said and justifiably between now and next Saturday. David, good to talk to you and thank you for your time.